good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You're listening to the Thai Expat Daily Show. I'm your host Kieran Mack and thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like this video if you're watching us on YouTube and please do subscribe. We're also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music and a host of other podcast players. Now that that's all done, let's jump into today's show. Well, hey there guys, and welcome back to the Thai Expat Daily Show. As we have a special breaking news show for you today in relation to the suspension of the Test and Go Thailand Pass here in the Kingdom. I normally do a show every 2 days, but as this is information that my listeners would want to hear about, we have decided to do a quick show for you in relation to it. Our show yesterday discussed and we spoke about was the possibility of the Test and Go program being suspended here in Thailand. And yesterday afternoon, we got the word that the Thailand Pass and Test and Go scheme has now been officially suspended until at least January 4th when they will review it again. But it's not looking too good for it at the moment. In a surprise and preemptive move to stem the spread of the COVID-19 Omicron variant, Thailand's Prime Minister Prayut and the Centre for COVID-19 Situation Administration ordered a temporary and immediate suspension of the issuance of the Thailand Pass from today until January 4th, 2022, and have imposed the 7-day quarantine requirement for those without a pass or outside of the Phuket sandbox program. About 90,000 people who have been granted the Thailand Pass but have yet to enter the country can still enter the Kingdom through the Test and Go scheme for fully vaccinated arrivals from 63 low-risk countries and territories with only minimum quarantine of about 1 day. Those still coming to Thailand under the Test and Go scheme will now have to go through more intensive checks such as 2 RT-PCR tests and will be closely monitored. Additionally, sandbox programs, which have been in place in several areas in 17 provinces except the Phuket sandbox, will also be suspended until January 4th, pending reassessment. The sandbox scheme requires travellers to remain in the province of arrival for at least 7 days at a certified hotel before travelling elsewhere, but without a strict quarantine rule. This means that to avoid the quarantine, travellers can enter Thailand through Phuket. Emerging from the cabinet meeting this afternoon, the Prime Minister said that the government will review the situation again in January and decide whether the Test and Go scheme should resume. The Prime Minister also said he had asked officials whether they are capable of coping with the 90,000 travellers who are yet to arrive, particularly with the possibility that some may be infected with the Omicron variant, and they said that they are confident that they can handle the situation. Meanwhile, about 30 tourism business operators rallied at the Ministry of Public Health today to protest against the suspension of the Test and Go program, claiming that it will hurt their businesses, especially during the lead-up to the New Year festival. A group of representatives said that people in the tourism sector are afraid that the suspension of Test and Go may lead to a partial lockdown of the country again, and she asked the Ministry of Public Health or the CCSA to stop instilling fear in people about the Omicron variant and to declare COVID-19 a local disease which is treatable. Earlier today, Public Health Minister Anutin Charavakool appeared hesitant over the suspension of the Test and Go program as proposed by the Disease Control Department, pointing out about half of the foreign tourists already granted permission to visit Thailand are already in the country. He added, however, that the ministry will increase COVID-19 screening of those already in the Kingdom. Now, as we discussed yesterday, this was very much a possibility, and unfortunately it has happened. It has been met with great anger from hospitality businesses throughout the country, and I fear that this may be the end of many of these businesses. This will certainly not breed confidence into travelling, and it really is a huge loss of face for the government. Now, to clarify many of the points here so that people are fully in the loop, because some of the media have really made an ass of this with some not so very accurate information. Firstly, people who have already received their Test and Go Thailand Pass will be permitted to enter under the programme regardless of the date of entry. Both the Bangkok Post and Thai PBS have inserted a date of January 10th. However, Richard Barrow, who has been the source for this information today, has been in contact with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who've confirmed that this is not the case. Applications who have registered but have not received their QR code must wait for their Thailand Pass to be considered. or approved. Once approved, they can enter Thailand under the scheme they have registered. New applications will not be able to register for Test and Go and sandbox measures except the Phuket sandbox. Thailand Pass will only accept new applications seeking to enter Thailand under alternative quarantine or Phuket sandbox only. Passengers who will arrive in Thailand under Test and Go and sandbox programs must undergo their second COVID-19 test using the RT-PCR technique, not ATK self-test anymore, at a government-designated facilities. There will be no additional cost for this. The Thailand Pass will be closed for all new Test and Go and sandbox applications except the Phuket sandbox starting from midnight tonight until further notice. Now, if you're one of the 22,000 people who have already applied for a Thailand Pass for Test and Go, sandbox and alternative quarantine, your application is being processed. If your application is approved, you will be able to come under the original condition. This means for Test and Go people, you only need to wait for the result for the first test and then you are free to go. Now, as I said, the source for this information has been Richard Barrow, who I highly recommend to follow on Twitter because he's always in the loop about things, and a lot of the time I get a great deal of information from him too. He's a magnificent source of information out there. What does this mean for the future of travel here in the kingdom? Who knows? I mean, to me, this is a huge knee-jerk reaction. We have little to no Omicron cases here in the kingdom. All that we have found basically is ones coming into the country. They have been caught, isolated, and then, being treated. So there's no real threat from them. But this just seems to be kind of like a following of what everybody else is doing around the world. And I kind of do feel very sad for businesses out there who now had been investing in staff, had been investing in reopening and getting ready, and it's just all been pulled from underneath their feet, just like that. Now, they said they're going to reassess this on January 4th, but why would you cancel it during your peak part of, the season? Airlines now are going to be looking at this. They're not going to be able to fly into Bangkok again. So I would say we're lucky if we're going to see airlines flying back here till next high season. To Bangkok especially. Phuket will continue. They will have flights every day, but not as many as they had before again. It'll be a scaling back. And this is the huge problem when you do this. You basically instill no confidence in the country. And we all know that airlines need advance notice. Now, Emirates, all these airlines that had been going into Bangkok are going to have to pull all their schedules, put their planes back out, and that's it. And they don't know for how long. Suvarnabhumi Airport will be empty again. I don't know what's going on here. I am very worried about Thailand's future right now. I hope this is temporary, maybe a month, and then they'll try and get it back up again. But for me, the damage now has already been done. With the minister's kind of announcement yesterday that wasn't really an announcement, and then today when they have announced it, I just think this is devastating news for the country as a whole. But guys, for you out there, I'd love to know what you think about this. We're going back to the Phuket sandbox again. The Test and Go will be finished up except for people who now have applied for it and have been granted permission to do it. But after mid-January or so, we probably won't have many Test and Go coming anymore, and it'll be all Phuket sandbox people who'll have to stay 7 nights in Phuket and do 2 RT-PCR tests, just like what was happening back in January. In truth, the Phuket sandbox wasn't the most successful thing that they've ever rolled out. It was good for one thing and one thing only, showing that very few people travelling from abroad who were fully vaccinated actually came infected to the country. But now we're rolling back to that again. As I said, hopefully this is only for a limited time, but who knows? We'll see. I will move on to one more story before we end today's show. And another interesting story, but obviously not as interesting as the Thailand Pass being suspended. Phuket's New Year's Eve all-nighter has been cancelled. The order by the Phuket Governor Narong Wonsi to allow the sale and consumption of alcohol at venues across the island all through the night of December 31st has been cancelled. The cancellation was announced through a notice posted by the Phuket Info Centre, operated by the Phuket office of the Ministry of Interior. The notice announced that all food and beverage outlets that are permitted by licence to usually sell alcohol until 11 p.m. were now allowed to sell alcohol and allow the consumption of alcohol on the premises until 1 a.m. only on the night of the 31st. The notice marked that the rule change was to allow people to enjoy the New Year's Eve festival. The notice, issued today, rescinds the order issued by Governor Narong Wonsi on November 27, allowing the sale and consumption of alcohol on New Year's Eve to continue through to 6 a.m. New Year's Day. No reason has been given for the abrupt about-face on the all-nighter previously allowed by the Phuket provincial government. However, the rule change follows the Centre for COVID-19 Situation Administration on Friday, dictating that alcohol throughout the country may be sold until 1 a.m. Previously, Phuket had been exempt from such orders, with the provincial government permitted to make allowances and minor rule changes for the benefit and safety of the people. Apparently, that is no longer the case anymore. So as we can see, there seems to be a tightening of rules and regulations around the country. Provinces that previously have been allowed to pretty much do what they want and make their own rules up, as in Phuket, are being reined in now by central government, and they too are having to follow the nationwide rules that have been set. So expect to see more of this in the coming weeks in relation to Phuket and Pattaya and other places that were allowed to sell alcohol. And I have a feeling we're going to see alcohol being cut again in the next few days. That's basically what I think is going to happen. I think we're looking at some severe restrictions probably come January here in the Kingdom. It's rather unfortunate. There's probably not a need for it, but Thailand are building themselves up for it, and you can tell with the stopping of the Test and Go program, now this restriction of alcohol, especially in Phuket, who've been normally allowed to do what they want. Yes, there seems like there will be heavier restrictions coming our way in the coming weeks. But ultimately, with this story or anything else that stood out to you today, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Because yes, this is a news show, but it's also a conversation. Now keep that conversation going. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and do all the good stuff that does help that YouTube algorithm. But ultimately, my name is Kieran Mack. You've been listening to the Thai Expat Daily Show, and we will see you next time.